June 6, 1944, 0500 hours. The English Channel churned beneath thousands of landing craft as the largest amphibious invasion in human history approached the Norman coast. Private First Class Anthony "Slugger" Romano gripped his Louisville Slugger baseball bat with white knuckles, the familiar ash wood smooth against his calloused palms, despite the spray of salt water cascading over the sides of his Higgins boat. Around him, 36 men from the 2nd Battalion, 116th Infantry Regiment, prepared for what they believed would be a swift breakthrough into German-occupied France within 72 hours. Little did Romano know that his childhood baseball bat, carried across an ocean against all military regulations, would become the most unlikely weapon to silence a German position that had already claimed the lives of over 200 Allied soldiers that morning. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the extraordinary tale of how one soldier's stubborn attachment to a piece of sporting equipment would transform from a source of ridicule into an instrument of survival that defied every conventional rule of warfare. The 22-year-old from Brooklyn had smuggled the bat aboard the troop transport USS Samuel Chase 3 weeks earlier, hidden inside a duffel bag beneath regulation gear and personal effects. Romano had played semi-professional baseball for the Bushwick Browns before the draft notice arrived in February 1943, and the 34-inch bat had been his constant companion through 3 championship seasons in the New York City Industrial League. "Hey, Romano, you planning to pitch for the Krauts when we get there?" Sergeant Mike O'Sullivan called out over the rumble of diesel engines as their landing craft approached Omaha Beach. The Irish sergeant from Boston had been needling Romano about the bat since training camp at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where Romano had practiced his swing every evening after drills. "Laugh all you want, Sarge," Romano replied, adjusting his waterlogged pack. "This bat's gotten me out of more tight spots than your service rifle ever will." His fellow soldiers chuckled, but Romano's grip on the Louisville Slugger never loosened as machine gun fire began echoing across the water from the cliff positions overlooking the beach. The German defenders of Widerstandsnest 72 had transformed the stretch of sand designated as Dog Green Sector into what American intelligence would later describe as the most fortified 200 meters of coastline in occupied Europe. Obergefreiter Klaus Richter peered through the steel observation slit of his concrete bunker, watching the approaching Allied armada through field glasses manufactured by Zeiss in Jena. The 19-year-old machine gunner from Bavaria had been stationed at this position for 8 months, operating an MG-42 machine gun capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute. "Amerikanische Schweine," Richter muttered to his loader, Gefreiter Hans Weber, a farm boy from Schleswig-Holstein, who had celebrated his 18th birthday just 2 weeks earlier. "They think they can walk onto our beach like tourists visiting Hamburg before the conflict." Weber fed another belt of ammunition into the machine gun, his hands trembling slightly as he counted over 40 landing craft approaching their sector. The German positions had been constructed according to specifications developed by Organization TOT, with reinforced concrete walls nearly 2 meters thick and interlocking fields of fire that created what military engineers called a killing zone, extending 300 meters from the high water mark. Romano's landing craft ground against the sand at 0630 hours, and chaos erupted immediately as machine gun fire swept across the beach like deadly rain. The 36 men of his squad scattered, some diving behind steel obstacles known as Czech hedgehogs, while others sought cover behind the minimal protection offered by scattered rocks and debris washed ashore during previous storms. "Move it, move it, move it," Sergeant O'Sullivan shouted as bullets whined overhead, striking sparks against metal obstacles. Romano clutched his baseball bat in one hand and his M1 Garand rifle in the other, stumbling through sand that seemed to grab at his boots with each desperate step toward the base of the cliff. The German machine gun nest that would change Romano's life was positioned approximately 150 meters up the cliff face, protected by a concrete bunker with walls designed to withstand direct hits from naval artillery shells weighing up to 1,600 pounds. Richter's MG-42 commanded a perfect view of the beach approach, and he had already expended over 400 rounds since the first landing craft appeared on the horizon. "I count at least 60 enemy soldiers pinned down below," Richter called to Weber as he adjusted his weapon's traverse. "Signal command that Sector Dog Green is completely under control." The young German felt a surge of confidence as he watched American soldiers seeking inadequate cover behind obstacles that offered little protection against sustained machine gun fire. Romano found himself pressed against a concrete seawall with 7 other survivors from his squad, including Private Jimmy Martinez from El Paso, Texas, and Private First Class David "Doc" Thompson from rural Minnesota, who served as their medic. Martinez had lost his helmet during the landing, and blood trickled from a minor head wound caused by flying concrete fragments. "We can't stay here," Doc Thompson said, checking Martinez's injury with practiced efficiency. "That machine gun up there has us zeroed in. Every time someone moves, they open up again." Thompson had completed medical training at Fort Sam Houston and understood tactical situations well enough to recognize their predicament as nearly hopeless. Romano studied the cliff face, noting a narrow path that zigzagged up through rocky outcroppings and scrub vegetation. The path offered some concealment, but would require crossing open ground for approximately 30 meters before reaching the first cover. German artillery observers in the bunker could easily spot movement along that route and direct machine gun fire to eliminate anyone attempting the climb. "I'm going up there," Romano announced, surprising his companions by pulling out his baseball bat and checking its grip. "That position is what's keeping our entire sector pinned down. If I can get close enough, maybe I can do something about it." His voice carried the quiet determination of someone who had made peace with a dangerous decision. Sergeant O'Sullivan, who had somehow managed to crawl over from another section of the seawall, stared at Romano in disbelief. "Slugger, you've lost your mind. You're talking about charging a concrete bunker with a piece of sporting equipment. That's not tactical thinking, that's suicide." O'Sullivan had seen enough combat during training exercises to understand the mathematical certainty of Romano's proposal. "Maybe so, Sarge, but I've been thinking about this since we landed," Romano replied, adjusting his equipment. "See that path up the cliff? It winds behind some rocks about halfway up, right where the machine gun can't traverse far enough to cover it. If I time it right, I might be able to get close enough to matter." Romano had spent his childhood exploring similar terrain in Prospect Park, developing an intuitive understanding of how to use natural cover. The German machine gun position represented a masterpiece of defensive engineering, constructed according to plans developed by the Atlantic Wall Organization under the supervision of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. The bunker's firing port was positioned to provide maximum coverage of the beach, while remaining protected from direct assault by naval bombardment or conventional infantry attacks. Richter had been operating machine guns since his assignment to the 7th Army in November 1943, and his experience told him that the American forces below were effectively neutralized. His ammunition supply included over 3,000 rounds stored in waterproof containers, enough to maintain suppressive fire for several hours, even under intensive combat conditions. "Weber, prepare another belt," Richter ordered as he observed movement behind the seawall through his optical sight. "I think some of them are planning something foolish. Americans always think they can solve problems by charging directly at them." The young Bavarian felt confident in his position's impregnability, having spent months training on similar defensive scenarios. Romano began his ascent at exactly 07:45 hours, using a brief lull in machine gun fire when Richter paused to allow his weapon's barrel to cool. The American soldier moved with the fluid grace of an athlete who had spent years sliding into second base under hostile conditions, keeping low and using every available piece of cover along the narrow path. The first 30 meters proved the most dangerous, requiring Romano to cross open ground, while German observers could potentially spot his movement. He moved in short bursts, timing his advance to coincide with the rhythm of waves crashing against the beach below, using the natural sound to mask any noise his equipment might make against the rocky surface. Martinez watched through field glasses from the seawall, providing Romano with hand signals about German observer positions. "He's actually making it," Martinez whispered to Doc Thompson. "Crazy son of a gun is climbing that cliff like he's stealing second base." Martinez had played baseball himself in high school and recognized the same controlled aggression that characterized Romano's playing style. Weber detected movement approximately halfway up the cliff and alerted Richter, who swung his machine gun toward the area where Romano had last been visible. "I see him," Richter said, adjusting his optical sight. "American soldier with some kind of stick or club. What kind of weapon is that supposed to be?" The German machine gunner had never encountered a baseball bat and couldn't identify its purpose in a military context. "Probably some kind of engineering tool," Weber suggested, feeding a fresh ammunition belt into the MG-42. "Should I signal for mortar support?" The young soldier had been trained to request artillery assistance when facing unusual tactical situations, but the machine gun position's elevated location made accurate mortar fire difficult to coordinate. Richter decided to handle the situation personally, traversing his weapon to cover the section of cliff path where Romano would next appear. "No need for mortars. One burst will finish this fool, whatever he thinks he's doing with that stick." The German gunner felt confident in his marksmanship abilities, having scored expert ratings during training at Grafenwöhr. Romano reached a position approximately 50 meters below the bunker and paused to assess his next move. The final approach would require climbing almost vertically up a section of cliff face that offered minimal handholds, while remaining exposed to machine gun fire for at least 20 seconds. His baseball bat, which had seemed like a foolish encumbrance during the climb, now felt like an old friend providing reassurance. The American soldier had developed an unconventional plan during his ascent, based on his intimate knowledge of Louisville slugger construction and the physics of baseball. Professional-grade ash wood bats were designed to transfer maximum kinetic energy upon impact, and Romano calculated that a precisely aimed swing could potentially damage the machine gun's optical equipment or jam its firing mechanism. "This is insane," Romano muttered to himself as he prepared for the final assault. "But it's also exactly the kind of crazy play that wins games in the bottom of the 9th inning." His confidence came from years of clutch hitting in pressure situations where conventional thinking often failed and intuitive improvisation succeeded. The German bunker's design included a narrow firing port approximately 1 meter wide and 30 centimeters high, positioned to provide maximum protection while allowing effective machine gun operation. However, this same design created a vulnerability that military engineers had never considered. The firing port was exactly the right size for a skilled baseball player to thread a precision strike. Romano began his final approach at 0800 hours, timing his movement to coincide with a German ammunition change that would provide approximately 15 seconds of reduced observation. He climbed with desperate speed, using his baseball training to maintain perfect balance while ascending the treacherous cliff face. Richter completed his ammunition reload and immediately began scanning for the American soldier who had been climbing toward their position. "Where did he go?" the German gunner asked Weber, adjusting his optical sight to cover the most likely approach routes. "He was right there 30 seconds ago." Richter's training had not prepared him for an opponent who moved with the calculated precision of a professional athlete. "Maybe he fell back down to the beach," Weber suggested hopefully. That climb looked impossible even for an experienced mountaineer. The young German soldier preferred to believe that natural obstacles had solved their tactical problem without requiring direct confrontation. Romano appeared suddenly at the edge of the bunker's firing port, having approached from an angle that German defensive plans had never anticipated. His Louisville slugger was already in motion, swinging with all the power and precision that had made him a feared hitter in the New York Industrial League. The ashwood bat struck the machine gun's barrel with tremendous force, causing immediate and catastrophic mechanical failure. "Was zum Teufel?" Richter exclaimed, as his MG-42 suddenly jammed beyond any possibility of field repair. The impact had bent the weapon's barrel and damaged its firing mechanism so severely that it became completely inoperable. Romano's baseball swing had delivered approximately the same kinetic energy as a fastball traveling at 90 miles per hour. Weber stared in shock as Romano followed through on his swing and immediately prepared for a second strike. "He's destroying our weapon with a piece of wood," Weber shouted, reaching for his sidearm while trying to comprehend what he had just witnessed. The young German had never seen anything like Romano's aggressive approach to bunker assault. Romano's second swing targeted the machine gun's optical sight, shattering the precision ground lenses that Richter needed for accurate fire control. Without functional optics, the German position became significantly less effective, even if they managed to repair their primary weapon. Romano understood that degrading enemy capabilities was often more valuable than achieving complete destruction. "American soldier, surrender immediately," Richter called out in heavily accented English, drawing his Luger pistol while keeping distance from the firing port. The German machine gunner realized that his position had been completely compromised by an attack method that defied all conventional military logic. Romano peered into the bunker through the damaged firing port, still gripping his baseball bat with both hands. "You boys ready to call it a game?" he asked with the casual confidence of a player who had just hit a grand slam in the bottom of the ninth. "Because I've got all day to keep swinging, and this bat's built to last." The psychological impact of Romano's unconventional assault proved as devastating as the physical damage to German equipment. Richter and Weber found themselves facing an opponent who operated according to rules they didn't understand, using weapons they couldn't identify, and displaying confidence that seemed completely irrational under the circumstances. "Klaus, what do we do now?" Weber whispered urgently. "Our machine gun is useless. His friends on the beach can see our position, and we don't have any way to call for reinforcement." The young soldier's training had covered many defensive scenarios, but none involving assault by sporting equipment. Richter studied Romano through the damaged firing port, noting the American's calm demeanor and professional handling of his improvised weapon. "I think we need to consider our options very carefully," the German gunner replied. "This soldier has demonstrated capabilities that we didn't expect, and our tactical situation has become quite difficult." Meanwhile, on the beach below, Romano's success had been observed by the surviving members of his squad and several other units pinned down along the seawall. Word spread quickly that someone had actually managed to neutralize the machine gun position that had been preventing their advance for over 2 hours. "Did you see that?" Private Martinez called to Doc Thompson. "Slugger just walked up to that bunker and took it out with his baseball bat. I've never seen anything like it in my entire life." Martinez felt a surge of hope as machine gun fire from other positions continued. But the most dangerous threat to their sector had been eliminated. Sergeant O'Sullivan stared up at the cliff in amazement, watching Romano maintain his position at the bunker entrance, while German soldiers inside appeared to be discussing their situation. "I owe that crazy bastard the biggest apology of my military career," O'Sullivan muttered. "I've been making fun of his bat for months, and now it just saved all our lives." The tactical significance of Romano's achievement extended far beyond the immediate neutralization of one machine gun position. Dog Green sector had been completely stalled by German defensive fire, preventing Allied forces from advancing inland according to their operational timeline. Romano's success opened a gap in enemy defenses that allowed several companies to begin their assault on the cliff positions. Colonel James Harrison, commanding officer of the 2nd Battalion, observed Romano's action through field glasses from his command post and immediately recognized its strategic importance. "Signal all units that Dog Green has achieved breakthrough," Harrison ordered his communications officer. "One soldier with improvised equipment has accomplished what we've been unable to achieve with conventional tactics." Romano maintained his position at the bunker for nearly 20 minutes, while additional Allied soldiers climbed the cliff path he had pioneered. During this time, he engaged in what military historians would later describe as one of the most unusual negotiations in combat history, using a combination of baseball terminology and basic German phrases learned during pre-invasion briefings. "Listen, Klaus," Romano said, having learned Richter's name during their extended conversation. "You boys fought hard, but the game's over. Your equipment is busted, you're outnumbered, and reinforcements aren't coming. How about we make this easy for everybody?" Romano spoke with the matter-of-fact tone of a veteran player explaining rules to rookies. Richter found himself oddly impressed by Romano's pragmatic approach to what had become an impossible situation. The American soldier displayed none of the aggressive hostility that German propaganda had taught him to expect, instead treating their confrontation as a professional competition that had reached its natural conclusion. "Weber, I think this American is offering us honorable terms," Richter said quietly. Our position has become untenable. Our weapon is destroyed and continuing resistance would serve no useful purpose. The young machine gunner had developed respect for Romano's unconventional but effective tactics. Weber looked uncertainly between his squad leader and the American soldier, who had somehow neutralized their supposedly impregnable position using equipment that belonged in a sporting goods store rather than a military arsenal. "What kind of weapon was that?" Weber asked Romano directly in broken English. Romano held up his Louisville Slugger with obvious pride. "This here's a regulation baseball bat, son. 34 inches of genuine ashwood from Kentucky. I've been swinging this beauty since 1939, and she's never let me down in clutch situations." Romano's explanation carried the enthusiasm of someone discussing a beloved hobby rather than military equipment. The German soldiers exchanged glances, trying to process the concept of baseball as preparation for warfare. European sports culture included no equivalent to American baseball, and neither Richter nor Weber could understand how recreational activities related to military effectiveness. "Americans play a game where they hit balls with wooden sticks?" Weber asked, genuinely curious despite their tactical predicament. "And this training helped you attack our bunker?" The young soldier's question reflected sincere confusion about American culture and military preparation methods. Romano grinned as he heard Allied soldiers approaching along the cliff path behind him. "Baseball teaches you to think fast under pressure, read your opponent's weaknesses, and swing for the fences when the moment's right," he explained. "Today you boys were throwing fastballs, and I just happened to connect for a home run." The formal surrender of German position, Widerstands Nest 72, occurred at 0830 hours, when Richter and Weber emerged from their bunker, with hands raised and white cloth attached to a rifle barrel. Romano accepted their surrender, with the same sporting grace he displayed after winning baseball games, even offering Weber a drink from his canteen. Lieutenant Colonel William Bradford, who arrived to assess the tactical situation approximately 45 minutes after Romano's initial assault, found the scene almost impossible to believe. "Private Romano, am I to understand that you neutralized this position using a baseball bat?" Bradford asked, examining the damaged machine gun and optical equipment. "Yes, sir, that's correct," Romano replied, still holding his Louisville Slugger. "The firing port was just the right size for a good swing, and ashwood is harder than most people realize. Once I got close enough, it was just like hitting a curveball on the outside corner." Romano's explanation made perfect sense to him, though it clearly challenged conventional military thinking. Bradford studied the destroyed German equipment, noting the precision with which Romano had targeted the most critical components. "Private, your unconventional approach has opened this entire sector for our advance. I'm recommending you for commendation based on your initiative and effectiveness under combat conditions." The lieutenant colonel had never written a report describing assault by sporting equipment. Word of Romano's achievement spread rapidly through Allied forces, advancing inland from Omaha Beach. The story of the Brooklyn baseball player who silenced a German machine gun nest with his childhood bat became legendary among troops who had witnessed the aftermath of his action. Major General Leonard Gero, commanding the 5th Corps, included Romano's action in his after-action report as an example of individual initiative overcoming prepared defensive positions. Private First Class Romano demonstrated that unconventional thinking and personal courage can achieve results that conventional tactics might not accomplish, Gero wrote in his official assessment. Romano continued to carry his Louisville Slugger throughout the Normandy campaign and subsequent operations across northwestern Europe. The bat became something of a good luck charm for his entire regiment, with soldiers often requesting to touch it before difficult operations. Romano never again had occasion to use it as a weapon, but its presence provided psychological reassurance to troops facing uncertain situations. Klaus Richter and Hans Weber were processed through Allied prisoner of war facilities, according to Geneva Convention protocols, and eventually returned to Germany after the conflict ended in 1945. Richter later described his encounter with Romano as the most surprising moment of his military service, noting that American soldiers operated according to rules that German training had never anticipated. In September 1944, Romano received the Bronze Star Medal for his action on Omaha Beach, with citations specifically noting his innovative use of available equipment to neutralize enemy positions. The ceremony took place in a field outside Saint-Vith, Belgium, where Romano's regiment was preparing for operations in the Ardennes forest. "I want to thank my high school coach, Mr. Patterson, who taught me to keep my eye on the ball and swing for contact," Romano said during the brief ceremony. "And I want to thank my teammates on the Bushwick Browns, who taught me that sometimes you've got to take risks to win the game." Romano's speech reflected his continued view of warfare through the lens of competitive athletics. Romano's Louisville Slugger was eventually donated to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, where it remains on display as part of an exhibit about baseball players who served during the Second World War. A placard describes it as the most unusual weapon employed during the D-Day landings and includes photographs of the damaged German equipment. After the conflict ended, Romano returned to Brooklyn and resumed his baseball career, playing semi-professional ball until 1952, when a knee injury forced his retirement. He often spoke about his military service at youth baseball clinics, emphasizing that athletic training could develop skills applicable to many life situations. The tactical lessons learned from Romano's action were studied by military analysts for decades after the conflict, leading to revised training programs that emphasized improvisation and unconventional problem-solving. The official history of the Normandy invasion includes Romano's achievement as an example of how individual initiative could overcome numerical and technological disadvantages. Romano's story also influenced post-war discussions about the relationship between civilian skills and military effectiveness. Sports psychologists and military trainers identified parallels between athletic performance under pressure and combat effectiveness, leading to expanded physical fitness programs in military training curricula. Klaus Richter returned to his family farm in Bavaria and often told his children about the American soldier who had attacked his machine gun position with a piece of wood. "He was completely crazy," Richter would say, "but also completely effective. Sometimes the unexpected approach succeeds where conventional methods fail." The bunker at Widerstands Nest 72 was preserved as a historical monument, with markers describing the various actions that occurred there during the Normandy invasion. Romano's assault is specifically mentioned in the historical interpretation, along with photographs of his baseball bat and the damaged German equipment. Military historians continue to study Romano's action as an example of how combat situations can be resolved through creative application of non-military skills. The incident is frequently cited in leadership courses as a demonstration of how unconventional thinking can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Romano lived until 1998, passing away at the age of 76 in the same Brooklyn neighborhood where he had learned to play baseball as a child. His funeral was attended by surviving members of his regiment, several of whom spoke about how his courage and ingenuity had saved their lives on Omaha Beach. The lasting impact of Romano's achievement extends beyond military history into American cultural mythology, where his story represents the triumph of individual character over institutional obstacles. The image of a Brooklyn baseball player charging a German bunker with his childhood bat captures something essentially American about approaching problems with determination and creativity. Educational programs at the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia, include Romano's story as part of their curriculum about individual heroism during the invasion. Students consistently express amazement that a sporting goods item could play such a crucial role in one of history's most significant military operations. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.